So it was Friday night. I get a text from my dad. And my dad asked me if I bothered to go to the baseball game. Now, I'm from Atlanta, and it turns out the Braves were playing in Kansas City against the Royals this weekend. And I've always been a huge Braves fan, and I was kicking myself because I've been so busy in my new job that it actually escaped me that my favorite team was playing within 2.5 hours of my house. So I was kicking myself for missing that. And so anyway, I talked to my wife and I was thinking about it. You have to realize that the Braves are in the National League, the Royals in the American League. So the chances that the Braves will be in Kansas City again, once every 5, maybe 10 years, right? It's not going to happen very often. So my wife and I put together a little plan. We went to the game last night. And you can imagine I had to get up and preach this morning, and I went to a 6:15 game and got home like 1. So if I forget something in my sermon, you know why. But the best part of the whole thing is I'm sitting there expecting them to lose. The Royals are World Series champions, and the Braves that just say they're not. Then I'm going through the game, and the Braves break through, and they score again, they score again. The game finishes. Do you know what the final score was? Did anyone watch?
5-0.
5-0. 5-0. So, against the advisement of many, I'm going to show you a picture of my joy. Okay, you can take that back. But I just want to say, I am so excited that the Braves finally got their 9th win out of 35 games. Yes! Yes! 9-26, here we go. But that was fun. I was thinking about the sermon this week, and I was thinking about the house, the parsonage, and you know, there's the basement down there, and against the back wall of the basement, there's a lot of shelves for storage and things. And the bad part about that is I've got a lot of places for storage and very little stuff to put there. But I was looking through some of my old things, the boxes that I packed, and I came across an old piggy bank. And it wasn't a piggy bank of just regular money. It was a piggy bank of special money. And so I went through it and I started thumbing through it. And I think I spent like 45 minutes going through all of these coins and things in my special piggy bank. What they are basically is things I collected as a kid. Foreign coins, souvenirs, whatever I thought looked interesting. A lot of it was like my grandparents had gone on trips to, England or wherever and brought something home for me. And I had all these different coins, so I'm thumbing through them the other night, and I came across a lot of very interesting things with this money. So for instance, right here, well, let's see. No, let's go with this one. All right. Right here, I have a Canadian dollar. I don't know when I'm ever going to spend that, but I have a Canadian dollar. And I don't know why I kept it. Here, I have a $2 bill, American. Actually, I can spend that, so I think I'm just going to put that in my wallet after this. It'll work perfect for a drink at the gas station. And this one proves that I am a millionaire. I have 1 million Turkish beer, what are these called? Turk lirası. I have Turkish lirası, 1 million of them. I'm rich. I don't know why I have this either. And then I go through my coins, and I found a lot of other things. This is, let's see, this is also from Turkey. It goes with my Turkish thing, and it's 50 bin lira. It's like 50 cents, I think. And then I go through some more. This is a Mexican coin worth 200, I guess it's pesos, I'm not really sure, but I'm going through all these things. Let's see, I have this. This is a silver dollar from 1971, an American. I want to say that's Eisenhower. This is a picture of a dinosaur. I don't know why I have that. I'm also spilling things. Okay, all right. Try this again. All right, see what else I have. I have, here's a 50-cent coin, a $50. Here is, that is British, 2 pence. We have a Susan B. Anthony dollar. Remember those? Susan B. Anthony dollars. Yeah, I got those. Here's a Canadian quarter. Here's the gold Sacagawea gold coin. Remember that? That wasn't very long ago. I have one of those. This is either Macedonian or Greek. I'm not really sure. It's clearly Alexander the Great in a Greek script, but it says drachma on it, which is actually in the Bible. And then, let's see. I have a bicentennial quarter from 1976. Remember that? 200 years the country had been around. They put out special things for that. This is a penny squashed and turned into, they wrote the 10 Commandments on it. Don't know I have that either, but I'm here going through my things. This is the oldest coin I could find in my collection. It's a penny from 1945. I want to ask, but I'm not sure I should, how many of us were around in 1945? World War II era, right? And then, what is this one? German. So anyway, I'm going through all of these things, and, well, most of it's silly, you know. I mean, I have the 10 Commandments and dinosaurs. But, at the same time, it occurs to me as I'm looking through this money that even though most of it really isn't that valuable to me, I'm not really going to use it anytime, it actually is significant because, well, I guess it symbolizes something more than it is. It reminds me that the world is bigger than me, and that not everyone has money that's green with faces of American presidents on it. Some people have all different kinds of money. And the world is so much bigger. And more than that, time periods have changed. And so the things that we used a few decades ago are not the things we use today. And so the world is not just bigger than me, it's older than me. And people have been using money for years and years and years. And I can't think that my small world is everything. And it symbolizes to me not just how big the world is and how significant it is, but also that my grandparents went to some of those places. And all of a sudden, this money means more than the dollars and cents that they actually are. It represents something that teaches me, beyond the dollars and cents, what is really going on in this world. And to me, that makes it valuable. When I think about the idea of, say, giving in the church, whether that be money or time or talent or resources or whatever it is that you give, I think it's important to note that it is worth more than just the dollars and cents we put down. In a month or two, we will be putting out a new budget for the year. But that budget is only worth so much because the dollars and cents mean a little bit, but the money is more than that. Think back to the Bible. Do you recall the story when Jesus talks about the widow who comes forward and places her very small coin in the offering, compared to the Pharisees who put down lots and lots of money? What did Jesus say about that widow's mite? It's more valuable than anything anyone else put in. And why is that? Because it was significant beyond the dollars and cents. It meant something in terms of the sacrifice that she made that was more important than the bottom line, because she gave everything she had. And more than that, do you recall the story where Jesus is teaching a group of 5,000 men, and they say these men are hungry, send them home to get food. And Jesus says, you feed them. And they go out and they find a boy who has what with him? 5 loaves of bread and what? 2 fish, right? And with the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he puts them in a basket, breaks them up in pieces, starts handing them out. And when they get done, they have 12 basketfuls of things left over. Because it multiplied and fed an entire group. All he gave was 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And they fed an army. Which means to me that it's more than just what you give. It's the fact that God can multiply it and turn it into more. The fact that it represents the sacrifice in what you have. And it makes a difference in the kingdom. So when we're talking about the money that we give and the time that we give and the talents that we give and the things that go to the church, it means more than just the dollars and cents or the hours or anything of that nature. It symbolizes something so much more. In other words, it's not just about paying, it's more than just paying for the air conditioning. It's more than just building maintenance. It's kingdom maintenance. And in fact, kingdom building. And so it's time to let go of the actual value and realize it is spiritually valuable beyond anything earthly. And so I'm looking through the scriptures and I thought about the Apostle Paul. And Paul was one of the ones who made it sort of he talked about it being a tradition to give an offering every week to help the church in different ways. And so there's a passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 16 that kind of introduces this habit that he's asking the Corinthians to get into. And so he says this: "Now about the collection for the Lord's people, do what I told the Galatian churches to do. On the first day of every week," what day would that be? Sunday, of course, okay. "Each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. Then, when I arrive, I will give letters of introduction to the men you approve and send them with them your gift to Jerusalem. If it seems advisable for me to go also, they will accompany me." Now, so he's already established this habit to take a little bit out, and then he's going to distribute it. And where does it say he's taking it? He's delivering it where? Jerusalem. Now that's surprising. Why would Corinth, which is on the islands of Greece, send it all the way to Jerusalem? In order to understand that, we have to go deeper in the scriptures because Paul mentions this collection in multiple letters. So let's go a little bit further. Let's go over to Romans chapter 15. Until these passages are toward the end of the book. He's talking about what he wants them to do with the letter and how they're to distribute things. But here in Romans chapter 15, we have another mention. We can start in verse 25. Paul is speaking to the Romans, and he says, "Now, however, I am on my way to Jerusalem in the service of the Lord's people there." So he's on his way to Jerusalem to serve the Lord people. "For Macedonia and Achaia were pleased to make a contribution for the poor among the Lord's people in Jerusalem." So he's taking a collection for the poor in Jerusalem. This is the same offering he was talking to the Corinthians about. Now he's talking to the Romans about it. And he even gives some justification for why he's doing it. He says they were pleased to do it, and indeed they owe it to them. For if the Gentiles have shared in the Jews' spiritual blessings, they owe it to the Jews to share with them their material blessings. Now, that's actually a little bit strange, isn't it? I don't know if I like that immediately. Wait a minute, they owe something to the Jews because the Jews were the people of God and brought in the law and everything. I have to pay them money. I don't know if I like that. That's a little odd for me. But when we get into the context, I'm going to try to see how I understand it. Maybe we can think of it a little bit differently. But let's go a little bit further because we're not quite done yet. In 2 Corinthians, Paul brings it up again. I'm not going to read that. We're going to save that for a later sermon. But in chapters 8 and 9, he talks in great depth about that very offering to the people in Jerusalem. This collection Paul is taking up and how to handle it, give generously, the proper attitudes and things of this nature. And then finally we find out that in all of this isn't even the first time Paul has done this and taken an offering for the Jewish people, because in Acts chapter 11, we set up the precedent for it. Acts chapter 11, we will see once again a very similar story here. Verses 27 During this time, some prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch. Antioch is the place where Paul is. It's the first sort of Gentile majority church. It's sort of a launching point for Paul and his missionary journeys. So they come down to Antioch, these prophets. One of them, named Agabus, stood up and through the Spirit predicted that a severe famine would spread over the entire Roman world. And it tells us that this happened during the reign of Claudius. The disciples, the Christians in Antioch, as each of one was able, decided to provide help for the brothers and sisters living in Judea. They did this, sending their gift to the elders by Barnabas and Saul, who would be Paul. Okay, so this sets the precedent. There's the need in Jerusalem. Paul, in his visits with the churches, gathers a little bit and takes it back to them. So for some reason, Paul thinks it's important that, to some extent, we give a little bit. Now, I know that we're bringing up offering, and it's a sensitive subject, and so let me slow down for a minute. I have never been one to act or prod or anything of that nature. But it is important during certain times of the year to talk about disciplines. It's more than just money. It's the time, the efforts, the resources, and giving what we are able, regardless of the actual dollars and cents. So that's all we're going to talk about a little bit. We've got the budget coming up, and I thought it was an appropriate time to just look into a few things. But I promise this won't be too painful. Fair enough? Okay. So we're talking a little bit about offerings. So let's go back to the book of Romans, where Paul says that they owe it to the Jews to give something. And let's try and figure out the context of this and make sense of it, okay? Let's go back to the book of Romans, and we will start right at the beginning of Romans. Now, the context here is that in the early church, Paul has an incredibly difficult task, which is that he is preaching the gospel to Gentiles, even though he himself is a Jew. And the church itself is largely divided between those of Jewish origin and those of Gentile origin. They have different ways of practicing things. Paul frequently talks about the Jews who insist that all be circumcised and that all follow the dietary laws, even though these are elements of the old Jewish faith, and Paul says we shouldn't put a burden on new Gentiles. And he often argues in this way. And then there are those Gentiles who think that they don't have to do any of that and show no respect for it. And Paul says you have to be wise and do things the right way. So Paul is constantly fighting a battle, trying to connect the Jewish Christians and the Gentile Christians in a single faith. Even in the book of Acts, we see they had a council to decide these issues in Acts chapter 15. In Galatians, Paul says that he and Peter himself had an argument about how to treat the Gentile believers. It was the biggest issue of the time in history at that point. How do we bring together Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians into a single faith? And that is the premier problem of Paul's ministry. He has both groups, and how in the world is he going to unite them? And so we get to the book of Romans, where Paul addresses this very clearly. He says over and over again the constant refrain, first for the Jews and then for the Gentiles. Here we are in chapter 1, verse 16, and I'll just read that real quick. This is Paul's almost thesis statement. He's going to go from this statement and then outline everything else in the book. This is the point. This is what he's getting to right there in chapter 1. This is common strategy when presenting letters and arguments right at the beginning to say this thesis. He says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because of the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes." And then what? First to the Jew, and then to the Gentile. For in the gospel the righteousness of God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last, just as is written, the righteous will live by faith. And so he says that this salvation is not for just the Jews or just for the Gentiles. He says it's to all who what? Believe. Then he argues from there on that salvation is by grace through faith. And that is the point. It does not come from obeying the law or anything else, or any traditional practices, or what you think it's about. It is about belief and faith in God, and that is the only justification for salvation. And on that front, the Jews and the Gentiles are alike. And is uniting them in their theology of what it means to truly be saved by grace through faith to all, Jews and Gentiles alike. He's addressing the problem head on, and in theology telling them that they are one. Now we can go to a couple chapters later, in chapter 3. Now you've all heard the famous verse in chapter 3, verse 23, right? For all have sinned and what? Fall short of the glory of God. We all relate to that because we all feel at times that we are sinners and that we need that forgiveness. And that's one of the basic elements of the gospel, is that we ourselves need the gospel because we have sinned. But how many people can go back to the very verse before that and read the entire context of it? And the answer is not many. Because when they outlined the verses of the Bible, there was no rhyme or reason. The authors did not put together verse 1, 2, and 3. This was later editors who wanted to make it easier to read and find things. And they put verse 4 beginning with, or verse 23, beginning with, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But if you go back to the end of verse 22, what does it say? There's no difference between Jew and Gentile, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. You see how that's central in his argument? It's not that all have fallen short of the glory of God. It's that whether you're a Jew or a Gentile, you've fallen short of the glory of God. In other words, that's the point. That's what I'm writing about. That it doesn't matter. You are the same in Jesus Christ. Whether you are a Jew or a Gentile, you've fallen short and need the forgiveness of God. So he's taking two groups on different spectrums and uniting them in his theology of justification by faith. And saying that that goes to all people based on belief, not the law or any other older tradition. And so Paul is uniting them in these beliefs and telling them that this is what draws his church together. It is his best treatise on the gospel. And it addresses that gap between the two different groups in the early church. Now, Paul never stops with just the theological. Romans is perhaps the most theological book in the entire New Testament. It's certainly Paul's most. And it goes through all this theology of how we are saved, and justification by faith, and all the arguments against it. But always in the second half of Paul's letters, he comes back to the practical. Have you noticed that? He starts in the theological at the beginning of the letter, then he moves to real, everyday stuff by the end of the letter. He gives instructions to husbands and wives, and men and women, and stuff of this nature. So the first part of Romans, if you go through 1 through 8, is very theological. Then through 9 through 11, those chapters he describes the Israelite people and how they are worked into this story and why they rejected Christ and how it breaks his heart. In chapter 12, he begins with the practical, saying that we offer our bodies as living sacrifices and things of this nature. And then, we get to chapter 15 that we read before, and what did he tell them to do every week? Take a little money, set it aside, and hear about the Jews in Jerusalem. Now, is that just a discipline, a practical discipline? Yes, but it's more, right? If the entire problem of his letter is that Jews and Gentiles are separated, he's trying to bring them together. First he brings them together in the theological, saying, you are united in your faith in Jesus. And then he brings them together in the practical. He says that you both have needs, so supply them for one another. And if the Gentiles should give a little to the Jews, how much further would that go in symbolically bringing those people together? It's theological and it's practical. And that's why he wants them to give to people who live many miles away. And so the money helps them in a very real way. But more than that, it symbolizes their connection. Its meaning is deeper than the dollars and cents. In fact, it's the unity of the church and one of the most difficult divisions in its time. Jews and Greeks, you're united in your faith. You're also united because you both put skin in the game and helped one another. And they're united in the practical task of giving what they can to help each other out. It is Paul realizing his vision on two different levels. And they tie together nicely. In our church today, we can certainly wonder about divisions. We have groups of many different kinds and many different backgrounds, and we'll often feel different, be different, talk different, worship different. But there is a unity in the theology of the need for the forgiveness of sins from Jesus Christ. And there's also a unity that when we offer, not to pay for our air conditioning, but to offer to enhance the kingdom of God and help out our brothers and sisters. And symbolically, that money has far more meaning than just the things that we've given in the offering plate. And so we ought to think bigger, dream bigger than just paying for the building maintenance, but in fact uniting the church of God in our mutual commitment. This is the greater spiritual significance of our discipline in these matters. Reasons to give include the fact that whatever we give, God has the ability to make it extra effective and multiply it to more things. Like the bread and the fish, God multiplied it and fed many more than what they actually had. And what we offer is only a portion, for God multiplies it in His hands and does more good with it than we ever could. Another reason to give is that in our discipline in giving a little bit each week, we show our commitment to God, we show our commitment to church, to our brothers and sisters elsewhere. We actually put skin in the game. And that is the essence of the community we have, that we share. You remember in Acts when it says that people gave and there were no needy persons among them. In one sense, that's incredible to even believe. At the same time, it shows the unity, community, and fellowship of the time that happened not just in the theological, but in their mutual commitment to help each other. And it was bigger than just the dollars and cents. And it was more than just air conditioning. And finally, another reason to give is that like those coins I was looking at, it makes you realize the world is bigger than you. When you have to look out there and go through our missions in the back of the church and figure out who needs it, what's going on in the world, and why there are people suffering outside the borders of the USA, Christians in other lands suffering, and how do we help them? Then we realize that the world is bigger. There are people going through different problems that are bigger than our own and more interesting in some ways. And to go out there and show our unity to them by supporting and helping, not spending our money unwisely, not misusing God's funds, but actually going out and showing our support for others out there in the world in missions in an important way. We show that the world is bigger than us. And it's bigger than the things we have to do right here in this building. And we realize and connect to Christianity beyond the borders. I saw a missionary one time who got up and he asked us all the question. And he asked us, okay, who do you imagine is, if you could picture the average Christian in the world, how would you picture him? And so I'm going to ask you that. If you're looking for the average Christian, who comes up in your mind? Now, I'm guessing, is he a middle-aged white man? Is he from the South or the Midwest a little bit? Is he vote Republican and have things of this nature? Okay, well, let's back up a little bit. In terms of the total population of the world and Christians, there's actually more Christians living in Africa and South America than there are in North America and Europe. That's significant. So you've got to move and adjust your average Christian image south a little bit. More than that, you've got to think about the average problems of them. And so if you take a woman in Africa who's struggling to feed her family, is in the midst of a AIDS epidemic in her region, who has a corrupt government, who's not educated, now you're starting to get the image of an average Christian on a worldwide level. And the fact that around the world the gospel is booming in other places where it's persecuted. Whether you're talking in Asia or even small parts of the Middle East and Africa, where the gospel is booming because it's so much bigger than us and so out there. And your picture of average Christianity, the center of Christianity, adjusts significantly. And you realize that the needs of the world are bigger than right here. And the church itself is bigger than right here. When you realize that and adjust your mind to show your support and solidarity beyond these walls and beyond Thayer, beyond Kansas, and beyond our country, then you realize just how big the world really is. And you can thumb through your foreign money and realize that not everyone's money looks like yours. And realize that it's far more significant than those dollars and cents. It's the solidarity, unity, and mutual commitment of the church. And that is why we give. I preached this sermon because I wanted to think about why we give. And it connected to Paul's collection for the Jewish people and the unity he sought in that moment, the connection to the larger world, and realized that throughout all of the New Testament, the money is not the issue. It's the commitment, it's the symbolism, it's the unity, it's the way God multiplies it, and the things it accomplishes beyond us. The dollars and cents and the value are such a little part of it, but the faith shown therein is everything. Father God, I pray that in bringing up a somewhat difficult topic, that all of us will not, react, but simply to pray and consider what it is that we are to do. And how are we supposed to be faithful and connect ourselves to the larger world? Lord, in our church, we desire to do more than just pay for our air conditioning. We desire to make a difference in this world and be a part of the community of Christians all around the world. We desire to love beyond our borders and make a difference, and to show our commitment that our skin is in the game. And so, God, I pray that whatever is sensitive in this topic, that would be moved away in favor of a spirit of reflection that would challenge and help us grow. Lord, actually, our church has done so well in so many things, and I'm very gracious to you for that. And we're blessed. But Lord, always for a season we must remind ourselves of those basic disciplines and ask you for your mercy and your grace and your multiplication so that we might be generous in our giving as much as anything else. May your name be praised, may you be glorified, may we honor you as we leave today, and may we thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ. The truth is, you have never needed our money. That would be a ridiculous reason to give. But you have needed our commitment, our faith, and our trust. Lord, so we can allow you to use us to change this world. So be glorified and honored. You gave all to us and made yourself poor through your Son, Jesus. And it is in his name we pray. Amen. This song is the invitation song. If you have a decision to make or one prayer, guess what? The baptismal is still warm.
Please stand. Once was lost, once was lost, now I'm found. Spirit away, I'm home now. Love.